Hey everybody, welcome back to Keeping It Real with Marilyn and Steve. Today is Sage Day. Welcome back to Keeping It Real with Marilyn and Steve. Today we are going to talk about the medicinal uses for sage. Most people are accustomed to using sage as a spice, but today we are going to be talking about how to use sage not for making stuffing or on sausage or with chicken or even infusing butter. We're going to talk about how we're going to use this medicinally. So this is sage that I picked out of our garden yesterday. Time got busy. We got this picked at the end of the day and I had it holding off until this morning to get back to work on it. Now we're going to show you how to make a tea with the leaves. We're also going to show you how to do a tincture and how to do an infusion and what the difference is between those and how each is used. The first thing that I'm going to do is get all these sage leaves off of the stems. I'm going to wash them, I'm going to tap them dry, and then I'll show you how I'm going to dry them for use later. Now that I've gotten these washed and taken off of the stems, didn't want to bore you with that whole process, we're going to put them in our freeze dryer to dry them. You can do yours in a freeze dryer, you can do them in a dehydrator, you can do them in the oven on a very, very low temp, at the lowest temp possible. You can even dry them by hanging them if you prefer, whatever method works best for you. But we're gonna put these in our freeze dryer, as that's what works best for us, and once they're dried, we'll be back for the next step. Now that you have your leaves dried by whichever method you chose that works best for you, the leaves are what we are going to use for our tea, our infusion, and our tincture. Now, if we were going to use this as a seasoning, we would take those leaves and grind them down to make a powder to put on the shelf with the rest of our spices and seasonings. So before I get into using sage medicinally, I just want to make sure that I make a couple of quick notes. First, if you have any kind of allergies to sage, you don't want to use this. If you are pregnant or nursing, there is a chemical in certain types of sage that isn't recommended for pregnant or nursing women. I can't pronounce it, so I will make sure I leave that information in the description for you. But just to get that out of the way first, now let's get on to making some tea. All right, to make tea, it's very simple. All you need is your sage and some boiling water. So the rule of thumb is if you're using fresh sage leaves, you want to use about a tablespoon of chopped sage leaves to 1 cup of water. If you're using dried crushed sage leaves, you're going to use about a teaspoon per cup of water. You're going to find that how much you use is going to be based on your preference for flavor. And the other thing is this does have what's been described as kind of a piney taste, so you may want to add a little bit of lemon or something to your tea to make it to your personal taste. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'm just using a standard tea baller, so we're just going to take some of our dried leaves and I'm going to put them in a bowl. I'm going to crush them up a bit, and then I'm going to fill my tea baller loosely, and I like mine a little bit stronger, but I'm going to fill this. I'm going to close it up, and then my tea baller is just going to go into my cup, and then I'm going to take some hot water, pour it over the top, and we're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes while we go over our infusions and our tinctures. To make our tincture, we're going to be using the sage leaves that we've made sure are fully dried, and we're going to be using some alcohol. Now the suggestion is 80 proof or better. We're going to actually be using 100 proof alcohol. You want a jar that has a cover. And I'm using a funnel just because it makes me make a little less of a mess. So before I get into the tincture itself, if any of you would like me to do a separate video that demystifies the difference between making tinctures, making infusions, making salves, please make sure you leave a note in the comments and I'll do that as its own video. It's really not difficult. There's some standard rules of thumb to follow and I'd be happy to share that with anybody who's interested. So let's get into making our tincture. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill our jar with our dried crushed leaves. Now we want to pack the jar as full and tight as we can before we put in the alcohol. So while I fill this, let me kind of give you some ideas on how tea and your tinctures are going to have very similar benefits. So you're going to be using this to help you with high cholesterol, to help with symptoms of menopause like hot flashes and night sweats, to improve memory, or to protect against bacterial and viral infections. So your tea, you're drinking straight, just right from the leaves. Your tincture is going to be a much more concentrated version of your tea. So let's get this filled and then we'll be ready to put in our alcohol. So as I had mentioned, I'm using 100 proof. This happens to be vodka that I'm using. And we're just going to pour this into the jar so that we fully cover our sage leaves. And we want to make sure that they're covered completely. I'm just going to let this sit for a minute. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back in a little bit, top it off if we have to, but we'll be covering this. You can give it a quick shake to make sure. You can reopen it. Use just a little bit more. Pardon my dog who's having a coughing fit. My honey will take care of that. And then we're going to put this away for 2 to 4 weeks. Periodically, we're going to go in, give it another shake, but we're going to let it sit for 2 to 4 weeks. The longer it sits, the stronger it's going to be. So once this is sat for 2 to 4 weeks, what you're going to do is take this, you're going to strain the liquid out from the leaves. You can use a strainer, you can use cheesecloth, whatever works best for you. And then you're going to store that tincture that you've made in a dark or amber colored bottle and put it somewhere that's cool. You want to keep it out of the sunshine, and that is going to be available for you to use. You can add it to a juice or to water. You can use, they say, recommended dosage is about 1/4 teaspoon up to 3 times a day. So as you can see, this is a much more potent version of what you're making when you're just making a tea. With our infusion, we're going to be doing similar to what we did for our tincture. We have our jar with the cover, we have our leaves, but this time instead of using alcohol, we're using oil. I'm using an extra virgin olive oil, which is what I recommend. So let me get these leaves and the oil into the jar, and then we'll come back and talk about what you would use this for when it's ready. We're going to cover these leaves, as I said, with olive oil, and then we're going to shake it, and then we're going to add some more oil until we know that it's really full. We're going to cover this and put it in a cool, dark place for 3 to 6 weeks. Again, the longer you leave it, the stronger it will be. And with it in your cool, dark place for 3 to 6 weeks, we're also going to shake it periodically, making sure that our leaves are still covered with oil every time we do. What I'm doing here is I'm just adding some more oil, and I took a knife and I'm just using that to kind of stir things up a little bit, and you can see that the oil level drops down pretty quick. So you want to make sure that you don't leave any dry spots, and crushing these more isn't going to hurt anything. But I'm going to do this until the oil reaches a level and stays at that height, right up near the top of the jar. Now that we have our jar of sage leaves covered in oil and we put this on a shelf in the dark for 3 to 6 weeks, when it's ready, we're going to take it out. We're going to strain it, again, using cheesecloth or a strainer, whatever works for you, so that we have the oils separated from the leaves. Now the oils can also then be made into a salve. If you're interested in seeing me do that, make sure you leave a note in the comments. But you can use the oil as is. And that would be used topically for things like relieving the symptoms of dermatitis, to rub into joints for joint or muscle pain due to arthritis or strains or sprains. Now you can also use the sage oil mixed with some rosemary. You want to use like a rosemary essential oil, and that can be used to treat dandruff and to help promote hair growth. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with this once it's ready. Now that my tea has had plenty of time to steep and cool off enough for me to be able to take a drink of it, let's taste it to see what it's like. It reminds me of a pine needle tea. It does have that kind of piney taste. If you've ever had pine needle tea, you'll know what I'm talking about. I like it just as it is, but feel free to add some lemon, add some sweetener, whatever it is that makes it taste the best for you. Now, with what we went over today, your teas and your tinctures you're going to be taking orally as a general rule, and your infusion you're going to be using topically, whether you use it just as an oil or you decide to make it into a salve, whatever your determined choice is for that. Now, again, this is something that we wanted to share with you. Sage is an herb a lot of people grow in their gardens, and we wanted to let you know it's something that you can use medicinally, not just when you're cooking. So thanks again for spending some time with us here at Keeping It Real. And as you can tell, our house is full of animals, so I'm sure you heard some of them in the background today. Remember, if you liked our video, give us a like, subscribe, share our video with your friends if you think they'd like our content as well. And until next time, everybody, take care.